Thank you for joining us for our MBAs of Impact Google Hangout. I'm Fanae Croft. I'm the Field Marketing Manager for the Americas region here at the Graduate Management Admission Council, and I'll be your host for today's event. So, currently, African American, Hispanic, and Native American students under-index in business school programs, making up only 15% of Gmat test takers in 2015. As many of you may know, by 2020, those who are under 18, that population will be majority minority. So one of our initiatives and our major goals here is to make sure that the business school classroom reflects that of our country and is more inclusive, only to make us better as a nation. So with this, we've hosted a few Hangouts this year, really focused on underrepresented minority candidates. So we've done diverse resources for minority candidates, and that we featured organizations that help to prepare and place candidates into business school programs. We did Minorities in Business, and that was an event where we had current students on, alumni, financial aid directors, community representatives, to really talk about the industry overall and why this matters, why it's important for you to take that next step to become leaders, to make that true impact on your organizations and communities overall. And so here today, this event is called MBAs of Impact. And so we're going to be featuring a panel of people who have gone on to achieve their MBA, and they're currently making those impacts in their communities, on their own personal lives and families, and in their careers at large. So we're really excited to have them on, and I'll introduce them in 1 second. But I want to share with you, if you're watching, this is an opportunity to engage, to ask those questions. So everyone here is already prepped to share with you, to give you the real, to let you know what to expect, and to just give you some words of advice. So if you have any questions that come up, just drop your question in the comment section. And from there, we'll make sure those questions get over. We're going to chat for about 30 to 40 minutes on our own, just with some of the questions we've already served up. And then from there, we'll take any questions that you may have. So really think about it. This is your opportunity. Some people have a mom, dad, aunt that they can talk to about this, and others don't. So really take heed and take the opportunity. So again, let me start by introducing my panel today. So we have Michelle Arancibia. She went to the Thunderbird Global School of Management with Arizona State University. She graduated with her MBA in International Management in 2007. We also have John Burt, who went to Duke's Fuqua School of Business. He graduated with his MBA in 2003. We have Malika Oyo. She attended the Robert Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland in College Park. She got her MBA in finance in 2005. And then we also have Khary Scott. He went to UVA at Darden. He got his MBA in 2001. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Khary, can we start with you? Tell us what you're currently doing now, and what was your path there? Like, what did you do before, and how did you end up in your current position?
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity. I'm currently the Vice President of Business Development at Capital One. I also previously served as the accountable executive for Voices, our Black business resource group. I did that for about 2.5 years, finishing up this past summer. I've been at Capital One for about 11.5 years. Oddly enough, I got my role at Capital One from a business school contact. A friend of mine who was a year ahead of me at Darden had worked at Capital One. I was working at Capital One, and I was transitioning at that time from the job I took coming right out of business school, which was a company called Inventus Controls, which is now Schneider Electric. It's an international firm, manufacturing and engineering, and so I was able to do that for about 4.5 years after school, and I wound up at Capital One, and I do partnerships. I do asset acquisition in business development in our partnerships group and with our corporate development group.
Awesome. Thank you, Khary. You brought up network, and that's an important part that many people don't know about your business school experience, that network you build is going to be invaluable. John, tell us more about your opportunities with your network, how you've used your network that you built through your business school program.
Yeah, thank you, Fene. Appreciate being involved here. This is very important, so happy to be part of it. So in terms of a network, I'd say for me, the network, it really starts well before business school. So once you figure out how to most effectively navigate a network, which is being helpful to people, typically is a good start to establishing relationships. So for me, business school was an extension of that effort. So on my path to business school, I leveraged my network to understand if this is a good choice for me. So I spent a fair amount of time with colleagues and friends who were already in business school or had previously attained an MBA. And throughout my experience, I spent a fair amount of time connecting with people of all different races, different genders in terms of club activities. I was the controller while I was in business school, so I was one of the money men. So we would help fund all the different operations for the school. So it put me in a unique situation where I was kind of a connector, if you will. So I got a chance to know a lot of people and just trying to figure out how you can be helpful. And that's really paid itself pretty well throughout my career. And that I had access to certain information, or as Kyrie mentioned, there was different recruiting opportunities or job opportunities that may not be on LinkedIn or may not be posted, but if you're in the right circle, that could actually play out pretty well. And that was definitely the case for me. One of my classmates encouraged me to participate in an essay competition with a group called Executive Leadership Council. And that was one of the things that really changed my path forward, because I was busy just like everyone else and wasn't quite sure, should I do this or not? But by participating in that experience, I got a chance to go to New York, visit a lot of different companies, meet with some senior vice presidents in the consulting industry, and be interviewed right there on the spot. So that's just one example of leveraging your network. And then since then, I've tried to be helpful and giving back to help others. So I think everyone on the panel has countless examples of how they benefited from a network, but also how they contributed to a network as well.
Awesome. Okay. So you mentioned even starting before you get to business school, which I think leads into, many people believe that they have to know when they're an undergrad or have some insight or information that says, this is my next step. I need to plan 5 years ahead. Malika, can you shed some light on how you made it to business school? Because you weren't an undergraduate business major, were you?
I was not. My undergrad was actually in sociology and elementary education. And actually, before I jump into that, thank you for having me on. Absolute, pleasure to participate in this. But yeah, my undergrad was in elementary ed and sociology, and I found myself on Wall Street, actually, and I was temping in a bank. And I was waiting to start my master's in education. And I think the best way to describe it would be calculated risk. I decided to forego the master's in education and instead continue on as a temp at the bank. I was in the private bank, actually. And really, it was going with my heart. I enjoyed what I was doing. I was in a space that it was all new information for me. And so I actually wound up learning everything hands-on, right? So it was really about aptitude. It was, the ability to pick up the skills, the willingness to understand and to have people around you that were willing to teach. The path to business school happened about 6 years in, when I realized that my what next was going to require the academic foundation. Up until that point, I'd learned everything hands-on. Luckily for me, I had 3 mentors who had all either taken the B school journey while I was working with them, or they were, years beyond it, but they were great role models. And it kind of gave me a clear path as well as an example of what an MBA would do for me. And so it wasn't a question of whether I would take it. It was a question of when and if I would go full-time or part-time.
Okay. Michelle, how did you end up in business school? And who were your major influences that kind of motivated you to take that path?
Thanks, Fanai, and thanks to Gmat for hosting this. I am really surprised that I took this journey if you look at my humble beginning. So I came from a Spanish-speaking household, single parent family, and nobody in my immediate family had educational background in terms of finishing an undergraduate degree, much less getting a master's. So when I was an undergrad in Miami, Florida, at Florida International University, I remember picking up the U.S. News and World Report and seeing what the #1 international management program was. And it was Thunderbird in Arizona. And I thought, that's crazy. Why would I ever do something like that? Why would I end up in Arizona? And that's the program that I actually enrolled with many years later, and feel that journey was slowly unraveling and seeing that folks that held roles that I aspire to, the common denominator was having that MBA and being very intimidated of like, okay, I'm first generation American. You know, my parents came to this country 6 years before they had kids. How can I even embark upon this? And it was really leveraging the network that folks have spoken about before embarking on even the Gmat journey to the National Society of Hispanic MBAs had a chapter where I lived, which is now Prospanica, and they had events, and it was kind of a touch and a feel to go out there and meet people who had similar backgrounds to me, and they were able to achieve that, and I found that really inspirational.
Interesting. Okay. Kari, what was your biggest misconception like going into your program?
You know, it's interesting because like Michelle, you know, I was the first in my family to go to college. And so, you know, when you don't have that background and you don't have people that are sitting around the table from you all the time, you're having dinner or whatever, you're at a party and they're all kind of highly educated people, you kind of don't know how big the world is. And you're not really, your exposure isn't there. And, you know, your parents do the best that they can, but there are a lot of things in life that they don't know. And so I think when I came to business school, I thought everybody that was there was going to be kind of a business undergrad that was just looking to kind of push their business knowledge forward. And that I was going to be, you know, around a bunch of people that were like me. And I was really surprised with the diversity that was there. We had people of all different kinds of educational backgrounds. We had people of all different kinds of professional backgrounds in the time between undergrad and grad school. You know, we were on a field trip and I was sitting next to a guy. I remember this before, you know, right before school starts when you're kind of doing your initial, like, get to know your classmate trip. And I was asking this guy, I was like, so what do you do? He goes, well, yeah, I'm a rocket scientist. And so I was like, you know, when you're a kid, you joke about, you know, it's not rocket science.
Right,
right. But then I'm like literally sitting on a bus next to a guy who's an actual rocket scientist.
Wow.
And so at that point, I really had to kind of pinch myself and say, this is a completely different world. And just talking to people and the experiences that they had in their life, it just opened me up to a lot. Like I didn't know. I remember a lot about business school, but one of the things I didn't know is that you can actually climb waterfalls. Like everything I thought, every time I'd seen a waterfall, you like go over the cliff and you go down the waterfall. Well, there's actual foliage under the water and there are people that climb this. So another classmate, that was their hobby, right? I come in, I'm a tall black dude. My hobby's basketball.
Right.
They're pretty stereotypical, right?
Yeah.
Another classmate's like, yeah, I climb waterfalls, right? So I got the rocket scientist and the waterfall climbing person. And those are the things that I remember most about school.
I love that. You're in the right room. That's amazing exposure.
Yeah.
Malika, tell us a little bit more about your experience and what you found most challenging and maybe most rewarding.
During the B school experience, I think the most challenging piece was going from salary to student salary, which was pretty much nil. So, you know, without trying to paint a pretty picture, it was going to having zero income was the biggest challenge for me, especially after having spent 7 years on Wall Street. And so sort of the way I got through that was really, you know, it's a conversation of, you know, what are you willing to give up? Giving up what you have to get what you don't have. And so I kind of buckled down. I you know, got out my spreadsheets, and folks would laugh at me, but I got out my spreadsheets and had it down to, I think it was about $10 per day. That was it. Like, this is how I was going to make it through. And so, yeah, it was kind of having a budget, got me over that hump. And then the most rewarding part of it, I think, was the classmates, my classmates. I mean, my classmates, about 40% of them were internationals, 30 to 40% were internationals. And so it was the diversity of ideas, the diversity of personalities, cultures. You know, I would host potlucks at my house, and we would just, you know, have a ball on the case competitions and, you know, workshops. Just having different ideas at the table was the most rewarding part of the experience.
Okay, let's stick with B School for a little bit. And I just want you all to kind of jump in here. For those who don't know how to chart this course, like what resources did you all use? And then also, what was your approach?
So I'll start. For me, it was, you know, I had kind of like this three-prong approach. I did research for a living, right? So I was constantly researching. So I did research. Every website that I could find regarding the schools, the rankings, each one of the schools' websites, all of the discussion boards around the application processes. So I had all of my research and kind of had the data there. And then I used my network of friends, colleagues, family members who had gone on for their MBA. And so I had conversations with them around what approach I should take, whether I should go to a state school, if I should wait to apply for the Ivy Leagues, should I go to a school in New York, should I do it part-time, full-time? So kind of had all of that information. And then at the end, kind of just had to also do my own gut check, which was, okay, what are you really trying to do? And so if in my space, it was, I needed the academic foundation to accompany the hands-on experience that I'd had. And so to that end, I said, well, in that case, the content is the same across the board. So it's really about the experience. It's about the classrooms. It's about the professors. It's about the resources on campus. And for me, proximity to New York, since I knew I was going back to New York. And so with that, it was really, for me, it was an ROI question. Like, how much was I really going to, the extra returns I'd get from the additional investment if I were to go to different, you know, pricing programs. And then, of course, there was funding. Funding helped. So funding was a big piece of my decision as well.
John, what about you?
In terms of the decision to pursue an MBA, is that what you mean?
The resources that you used and how you approached applying.
Okay. So similar to I think what was mentioned previously, a few things. I mean, it started with like why get an MBA with me, and so I kind of felt pretty comfortable with my story of why I wanted to pursue an MBA. I mentioned a little bit earlier that, you know, part of the platform is also to do your research. I mean, so there's plenty of information out there on the rankings and schools, et cetera. That really hasn't changed a lot, I guess, since I was going through the process of business school, but still did my due diligence in terms of doing the research. But then from there, it went to my support network. So people who I could confide in and talk to about like why they chose to get an MBA and why they chose different schools in their process. So none of that is probably, I think it's still applicable today to think about how to leverage your network. I think the trade, I mean, so to me, it was really a trade-off. So I'm giving up income and stability with the idea of what's it going to get me in return. And so for a 2-year period, I was comfortable with that trade and taking the risk. And, you know, from there is also just understanding what the recruiting process is. So knowing what your profile looks like was something that I kind of had some assessments done to say, well, look at John, here's who you are today. Here's where you want to go in the future. And, you know, how does that look from a business school standpoint, including my academic undergraduate profile, what my test scores for Gmat would look like, and then also my work experiences. So actually, I started doing that process probably about a year and a half before I applied to business school. And one of the gaps was from a leadership standpoint. I didn't have, I mean, I was an analyst, so I didn't have a lot of examples of leadership. So I was encouraged, and I ended up joining a couple of nonprofit boards as a treasurer to actually convey how I'm applying my skill set in my day job and career, if you will, to the betterment of the community. So that was something that kind of enhanced my resume and the application process when I was going to business school. And I applied, I ended up going to business school about 2.5 years after graduation. So I was a little bit on the shorter end of the curve of the 5-year, 6-year process, which it's okay, but I knew that, but also knew I was competing with people who were really talented, and I had to show I had a bit more to contribute to the classroom experience. And then from there, in terms of resources, more resources now. I mean, so GMAC was one. I remember going to a conference way back in the day. This is going to tell my age, and being in a conference room where the MBA representatives were there to talk about the program. National Black MBA, I believe Michelle mentioned the Shimba. They had a conference. I walked that B school hallway, if you will, and met the different representatives there. And they told me about the different diversity programs. That was really critical. And then I ended up going and visiting some schools. So many of them have diversity conferences where they're looking for people of color and women to come in and experience the business school lifestyle. And I think the other two things that made a difference were test prep. So I ended up taking some test prep program, I believe Kaplan at that time. So there's many test prep programs out there now. You don't have to do that, but I thought based upon the structure and approach, and I already had graduated, I wanted to make sure I gave it my best shot. So I did end up taking a test prep, course. And then from there, it was really about practicing my story. I mean, so you can't change your profile, who you are, your academic profile, but thinking about what is the path forward and deciding which MBA program was going to be the best fit for me. So for the most part, I mean, these are the type of things that the average person probably is doing anyway. So I'm not saying that I was unique in that process, but I had a pretty good tight approach in terms of time commitment and managing my time throughout that process. Now, given now there's a lot more organizations out here to provide resources, whether it's MLT, Consortium, Twigo, Forte. So there's probably 15 different organizations that provide support. Many of those organizations weren't around when I was going to business school. Some were, but I do think there's really no reason that people can't tap into the resources to help them be successful throughout the process if you determine that's what you want to do.
Okay. So I want to shift a little bit because I think sometimes there's this, why do I need an MBA? I went on, I got my undergraduate degree, and now I need to go make some money. And I'm just going to leave it there. And one thing we talked a bit, Karish shared where he is now. He's a vice president, Capital One. But I also want to have the rest of you, Michelle, if you can talk more about what you're doing now as an education officer with Prospanica. Malika, you have Nomadic Souls. John, you have MBA Jumpstart. So all of you have been able to make that impact in your career. Which many of you, it even goes beyond that and is more widespread to impact the lives of other people. So let's talk about that a little bit to really help our viewers see the big picture, the end or final destination. Michelle?
I would say that Prospanica, which was the National Society of Hispanic MBAs, was so integral into me finding my path to business school and seeing folks like me that, Spanish was their first language, et cetera, that ended up going through this path. In my professional life, I serve as the education officer at our local Columbus chapter. And the way that we give back to the community this last year with an organization called Femergy, Girls Heart Reading Ohio, they have tween girls, and we did a business program for them to do a Shark Tank case competition around food trucks. So give them some education basics on accounting. And these were young girls of color and different diverse backgrounds so that they could also give back and start to see that this is a path that could be for you. And we brought in a number of different stakeholders with the Ohio State University Fisher College of Business that were subject matter experts. So you really had an opportunity to open up, build those relationships. It lasted, I want to say like seven months. a lot of Saturdays, but that's the kind of thing that you feel if you can impact one person's life to pursue higher education. An MBA made an enormous impact for me personally and professionally, that someone like me can do that. And the representation of females in business school is still quite low. So that's another issue near and dear to my heart.
Malika?
Sure. So currently, I have nomadic souls, and if you look at what everything you've heard me say to this point has been Wall Street, Wall Street, Wall Street, and I'd probably say that when I went in for my MBA, the idea at the time was that I was using it as a pivot to shift from a buy-side trader, sales trader, to moving over to the sell side, sales trader. And so it was clear for me that it was about the foundation, academic foundation, and then using that as the pivot to shift the needle within the Wall Street space. 19 years later, right, here I am with as an entrepreneur with my own company. And I think what's really been beneficial is tools that I picked up in 2003, 2004, 5 with the MBA. I did not realize I was using them all the way along until it came to the point of me actually running my own business. And so you're talking about Porter's 5 Forces, you're talking about marketing tactics, you're talking about just a living business plan. And that's something that I really, to be honest, I was shocked. I was actually shocked at how, like, all of a sudden it's just like, just rolling off my tongue, the different things that I need. As a matter of fact, I was, last year I was talking with this company. They had just launched this program where they were sending, they have 75 people that move around the globe. And in a matter of like a 1-hour conversation with somebody at the exec level, I was able to have all these sort of ideas for them that, where did I get it from? It was strictly from my MBA toolkit. And it was just information off the top of the dome, if you will. So yeah.
That's awesome. What about you, John?
Well, for me, it's actually kind of interesting. I heard a few people say I was first generation go to college as well. For me, I actually came across my first little business plan when I was in high school. So there was an element of being an entrepreneur that was in me from way, way back. Now, mind you, if I showed you that business plan, we all would have a big chuckle because you're like, whoa, what is this guy thinking about? But the important thing to me was that at some point I wanted to own and run something. So business school was helpful for me to kind of make a pivot. I was a finance person going into business school, so I was very comfortable with the number and analytics, but I needed to know how to kind of make the numbers talk, if you will. And also I was seeking to be a strategic advisor. And what that really meant was I wasn't sure if I wanted to advise on finance topics or business topics, et cetera, but the goal to me was to be an advisor and to establish a company doing that. And so business school was extremely helpful for me to make the pivot to become a management consultant. So I got a chance to do the formal training by working at 2 professional service and management consulting firms, one in New York and also Boston and Chicago. And it also gave me confidence in a skill set to go out and to earn the right to be a trusted advisor. So we all know what doctors do. And if you have medical issues, you seek them as an advisor. We all know what the attorneys do and seek advice and guidance from a legal standpoint. But from a business standpoint, I want to be that business doctor, if you will. And so business school gave me the foundation from a academic standpoint. We all took the same accounting and finance and marketing and operations courses. But beyond the foundation there was an opportunity to really test it. And so there's 1,000 reasons why not to pursue your own business, but it gave me confidence to figure out, like, how do you put something together to make sense, right? And so on the back end, I was fortunate to be able to have experiences where I could practice selling. I could practice influencing people to make decisions. And so that led to kind of me becoming an entrepreneur which kind of was in me in the first place, but how do you operationalize that? Because we all have ideas, but it's really what you do with them. And then in addition to that, it was also about giving back. So I was a recipient of a lot of love and care and mentorship, so as a member of Inroads in college. And so I felt there was an opportunity for me to continue to give back by speaking to people, but also creating a platform for people to pursue their purpose in life. And so that's both financially giving, but also giving of time and creating an organization that was a feel-good organization through Jumpstart, but also makes an impact. So I've had a great run. And then fortunately on the back end, as you're an alum, that they're going to ask you for a variety of things, your time, your money, et cetera. So I've been fortunate to be able to serve on a couple boards for both the academic institutions I attended. So it's been great to help them think about their strategy and also connect with some of your other alumni who, again, will kind of make impacts in ways that you couldn't imagine in terms of the access and network where people will take ideas and be willing to help you.
Okay. Karee, 2 quick questions. So when you entered your business school program, was that your end destination? Did you say, I want to be an executive at this type of company, and so let me go to business school? Or did one thing lead to another and you made your way there?
No, so it's interesting. It was more I want to be an executive at a company. My father, who's kind of the center of everything that I do, didn't go to college. Like I said before, went to the armed forces. So that was like black man college in the 60s. And when I was growing up, he was always just talking to me about being in the room. So when people are making decisions about businesses that are going to affect people's lives, both the lives of the people that work there, but also the lives of the people that use the product that they're selling, you want to be in the room when they're making that decision, and you want to contribute to that conversation. And so my whole undergrad experience was pointed that way. And then when I graduated and I got a job and I was working at a bank in Dallas, I felt like I was in the room, but my voice wasn't necessarily loud enough. And the reason it wasn't loud enough is because I was the youngest person in the room. Like they were like, hey, Karee's got some ideas, we should bring them in. But then when I would bring the ideas out, they would say, well, you don't really have the experience. You've only been here a few months or a couple of years. We've all been doing this for 20, 25 years. And so I wound up losing out to, some of the older folks. And so some mentors of mine started to bring them this problem, right? Like, hey, I think I know some stuff, but there's a challenge. I keep getting challenged on the experience piece. And so they were like, think about going to school. And I had thought about grad school before, but when I looked at kind of my current situation of my undergrad and my business experience and kind of what I didn't know and where I wanted to go, the MBA filled that gap. That was the answer to the X and X variable in that equation. And so when I started looking at different schools, the challenge for me was I learned by talking and with a bunch of different people. And so I needed to be in an environment where it was much more discussion than actual kind of lecture. And so that was really hard to kind of find that right environment. But ultimately I did. And by doing that, it allowed me to fill that gap. And so now, when you're in business school, you're taking 3 or 4 classes a day, you're doing 2, 3, 4 cases a day, 15, 20 cases a week. You're just looking at all these different business situations. So in essence, the velocity with which you learn and the experience that you can draw from when you get back in the room, you can now say, well, this is a situation similar to what company X did back in at this point. This is where this is where it went well. This is where it didn't. The places to go research for answers. I've got a bigger network of people that I can pull from when we're in certain situations. And so for me, it has always been kind of how do you become that executive at a Fortune 500 company. And the MBA was really the main way at the time to help me get there.
Awesome.
Can I add?
Yeah, go ahead.
You bring up a great point with Nomadic Souls. I was actually able to reach out. I remember reaching out to classmates and like having serious soundboarding sessions with them around, you know, this is the strategies that I'm about to implement, and these are the companies that I'm going after, and this is, you know, the model that I want to use. And having people that, one, this is what they do for a living currently, but also you all went through school together. You can take that advice and you trust without even double, triple checking. You are clear that, you know, they're giving you solid advice, and it's coming from a space of love as well as a space of, you know, knowledge. And so we would talk about, you know, using my MBA plus everybody else's MBA that I was there as well. You know, it was really helpful.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. And, some of the tactical things I think that made a difference is, look, you can take accounting courses online, right? You can take marketing courses online and Khan Academy or whatever it may be. Some of the basic things to me was like a structured approach to have time. You know, so for right now, many of you are probably working. So you're working 40, 50, 60 hours a week. You have time in a structured environment for 2 years to kind of test. Right, test things, understand things, to your point, Malika, about testing your ideas in a safe environment. And that's so crucial, but also you're like a sponge for all this information, right? And so then from a time management standpoint, we all have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you're going to get pushed, right? So there's case studies and how much time do I spend on this one or that one? Oh, there's recruiting events. You know, then by the way, this executive is coming. Then you want to work out. So it's kind of like this controlled environment where you get a chance to really develop yourself in ways that will push you. And on the back end of it, you come out as like a new and improved you, right? And so I think that's probably one of the most unique experiences I felt going to business school. And I think Malika mentioned the idea of financial, right? So we all have financial challenges, right? But for the most part, I have not come across anyone who's going to business school and said, hey, it was a bad investment, right? It was a bad use of their time, right? Because it depends on how you view it. And if you could fund it, you know, time is one of the best resources we have, and financially you can support it. People are doing trips to Iceland and all kind of crazy stuff while in business school. So don't be fooled to thinking you can't survive financially while you're in business school. And some people even get funky with it, and they're actually able to make money and rent property and do other things while they're in business school to help fund it. So just a few of the thoughts that came to mind as you're speaking about what the experience really was about.
And I would dovetail on that and say, I was one of the people that, you know, I spent a semester in the Czech Republic in an exchange program. I went to South Africa for a month. I did a winter study in China, Singapore, and added on all these experiences with folks that were from that country in businesses and large branches that were in those countries, and saw in terms of where our global business is going. You know, nobody can avoid it. Just like the demographics of the United States are shifting and being more diverse, you need to have that global mindset. And that's a really hard thing to do from a Khan Academy course, as opposed to being with colleagues and other big school students and alumni that are currently in that country. So I can't put a dollar sign on it for the opportunity cost. Yes, I gave up 2 years of income, but what I gained financially in terms of my earning potential, plus intrinsically what I've gained in terms of growing as a human being and being immersed in different cultures and meeting lots of different other people, I can't put a dollar amount on it.
Love that. Okay, we got a lot of questions. So I'm going to get to a few of the questions, and keep asking. It's your opportunity. Our first question is from Mitzi. As people of color, have you found the MBA has given you leverage to overcome preconceived conceptions and gain access to leadership roles, particularly for the female panelists?
I would say having the MBA absolutely gives you the permission, if you will, right, to have the ideas shared and to have them shared and at least viewed with respect. Whether or not that has the ability to change preconceived notions, I'm just going to go ahead and say no.
Yeah, I would concur with that. So I would say
I mean, I'd love to say yes, it does, but no.
Yeah.
I would say it gave me legitimacy. I felt like because I carried those 3 letters with me, I felt like I deserved to have a voice or a seat at the table that people have talked about. But if anything, most people don't necessarily perceive me right away as being a person of color. So I saw a lot more in Fortune 500 companies, people opening up, executive level people sharing some preconceived notions about Latinos and Hispanics or people of color. That was shocking to me. You know, presidents of companies saying things that are just ignorant because I might look safe to them as somebody that they would not perceive as being a person of color. So I would say, yes, it gave me a sense internally, the imposter syndrome that Lean In, you know, Sheryl Sandberg talks about in her first book of Do I Really Belong Here? Should I Be Here? That MBA really helped with that and legitimized me. But I would say I probably was more disappointed with the reality, and there's still more work to do. But as more Latinas, as more women, as more people of color get involved and are in C-level executive positions and sitting on boards, that's going to change.
Okay, thank you.
I hope.
God's ears.
Here's another. B schools want applicants who can communicate how the MBA will help. If we want to build companies with social impact, how would you suggest we communicate that if we don't have an exact business idea? So I think the question here is, how do you show as an applicant that you'd be able to add that value, even if you don't have a clear-cut idea, but you can express that that's something you want to contribute and you're able to contribute?
I think one way you might be able to sort of super spin that would be to take the ideas that you are sort of your ideas would align with. And then from that, in your interview and in your discussions, kind of talk about what are some other ways that they can impact communities other than whatever their target community is, or how that idea might work in another country, or how it might work in another setting. And so it is not your idea, but it does show your ability to approach a problem, dissect it, and then apply it elsewhere. So in the absence of you having your own idea, you might want to look at other people's ideas and then continue to kind of build and dabble in those.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I also think, part of the process is that you're trying to convince people to buy you, buy you and your brand, and what track record do you have? You may not say you have the business idea of what you want to do, but what is the track record of the things you've been able to make an impact? And people can get their head around, like there's some confidence they have in what you're aspiring to do based upon your historical kind of track record. Most of the business schools are looking for diversity that's been mentioned here in terms of international U.S. experiences, et cetera. So clearly, they're looking for people to be employed, after graduation. But there's also an element of the entrepreneurship and making an impact. And I think that's something that there still is a need from a social standpoint. And right now, there's more examples of people focused on economic development and some kind of non-traditional type things from a career standpoint that big companies are interested in, as well as others are looking for startups. So I think part of it is just kind of crafting, well, what is your story? And then testing with people to get their feedback on what their initial reaction is. And if you can convince people to buy into your concept, then that's fine. Now, if you determine that either I'm the idea generation person or innovation person, or I'm the operation person, that's fine. But determine which of those do you think you're better at? Because usually it's not the same person that's really, really good at both of those things. So you can be the innovation person who develops a following of people who buy into your concepts and ideas, or you can be the operation person to help someone else to execute them. And both of those things are fine, but just determining which do you think that you're good at and how do you want to position that with the business schools.
Yeah, based on what John said, it is about being your authentic self. So you shouldn't be just checking a box that says, oh, look, I did corporate social responsibility, or I need to demonstrate this because it looks like all these other candidates are doing that. I would say, is it you? Does it resonate with you? Is it something you really care about? If it is, most organizations have some element of corporate social responsibility, or there's a slew of things that you can do in terms of what that is impacting your community with organizations, whether that's homelessness, whether that is tutoring, whether that's senior citizens, and you can show that at in the smaller scale what your personal impact was. And also, as John was alluding to, like if that's microfinance, if you're in the finance world, learn more about that and how that can be done in developing economies if that's something that you're passionate about. But I would just recommend at the end of the day, you have to be you. Like, yes, you want to sell yourself, but be authentic with yourself. And if it's something that you really care about, it's going to resonate no matter what you do.
Thanks, Michelle. For any of you who have some insights as it relates to admissions, we have a question. How does advanced age, let's say you're over 40, how might that affect your success at getting into a program and then the subsequent job, getting a job thereafter? Does age play a factor, and may it help hinder? What are your thoughts or experiences there?
I was a traditional, go ahead.
No, you got it. Go ahead.
I was the traditional age, more or less, and I had this probably perception that was not correct, that I had a turkey popper, that if I turned 30 and I didn't have an MBA, like the world would end for me. And that was a ridiculous, now that I look back so many years later, it was so arbitrary. We had someone in our program who was 70 something. And I remember asking like, oh, I met him at an event. I was like, what year did you graduate? He's like, I'm currently enrolled. And I thought that was amazing. He's like, it was always my goal to do this. And I want to do this. And there were some people that said, well, what about the opportunity cost? And what are you going to do after this? But he really didn't care. And he felt like for his own personal growth, I would think advanced age candidates would bring so much to the table in terms of world experience, in terms of practical knowledge. When you're doing those business cases, you could contribute and say, oh, at a company I worked at, or a lot of folks that are currently in business school may not have been alive when this event actually happened, and the interplay of political, socioeconomic factors that contributed to that. I would think they would add a great deal, but I'm not in admissions, so.
I think admissions, and I could be wrong, I'm willing to be wrong, but I think admissions programs kind of have this idea around like what they want the class to look like in terms of having it as diverse as possible. And so my offer would be, if you think that, so the person that's an older student, they actually might fit like several buckets within the class composition. So that could actually wind up being a benefit and not a hindrance, if that's what the angle that they're going with. 1, 2, if you think that there's something within your profile that would be the case, you would probably want to register or apply as early as possible. And so that way your profile is in front of the admissions committee. And so as they begin to build the class, they have your profile there and can figure out where you sort of fit within the class composition. Be my take if I worked there.
Yeah, I would say, so as someone that I think I applied to business school when I was 25 years old. So I was on the younger end of the curve. I mean, some programs will accept people straight out of college. I think it's a fair question from an age standpoint, but like my response is, I think it actually shows that you have a continuous learning appetite, which I think is really important. There's plenty of studies out there now talking about this next wave of employment is a combination of continuing to learn and reinvent yourself in a variety of ways. So I wouldn't think of your age as kind of a negative, but back to the basics of what have you done throughout your life and career up to the point you're however old you are. What can you contribute to the program? And then also, what is the path forward? Like, what are you actually looking to do? And if you can answer those questions in a variety of ways, you can make a solid case for why you think you may be a good candidate for the MBA program. Now, the other thing I'd say is that most MBA programs have a variety of options, right? So there's full-time or daytime programs, there's executive MBA platforms, there's international, cross-continent, part-time. So, I would say based upon who you are from an age standpoint, I assume you're probably someone who's a little older, just explore which one of those scenarios you think may be the best fit for you. But clearly, I think age is not necessarily the one determining factor in terms of if an MBA is for you.
Age is
Okay, we have Terrace. She just wanted to give you all a shout out, that she really appreciated you sharing your experiences. So I wanted to share that. I have a really interesting question from Latrice. She says, with more debate over whether MBAs are still relevant, the introduction of MOOCs, rising tuition costs and the student debt crisis, do you think the value of the MBA has changed? And would any of these factors impact your decision to pursue an MBA if you were to make that decision today?
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. I sit on a communication council back at Darden, and I was just on campus a couple of months ago having this very conversation. And I will say that the landscape has changed. There's, less and less residential programs. Prominent kind of mid-tier schools are closing their residential programs. They're doing more stuff online. But the top schools, the top 15, 20 schools, like I think John said earlier, are kind of still the same and still investing in the program, but the curriculum is changing. And so what I would say is that you need to do your research on the curriculum that they're actually teaching. There needs to be more communication in the curriculum. There needs to be more of a tech focus and a data analysis focus in the curriculum that wasn't necessarily as big. I mean, the analysis focus obviously has always been there. The tech focus wasn't as big when I was doing it, back in the early O's. But what I would recommend, what I would say to you is that I would totally do it today. It's just a little bit of a migrating curriculum that you gotta figure out. But I would totally do it today. It totally makes sense. It's been the best thing for my life professionally. Had I not done this, I would be in a different place. I'm arrogant enough to think I would still be successful, but who knows? But I would totally do it over today, even in this environment.
Yeah, I would chime in with the same sentiment that I would do it over again. I would be much more cognizant of the impact of the financial crisis, which was in the process of happening. I graduated in 2007. So to that end, like even for student lending at that time, there had been a great deal of consolidation. It was getting harder and harder to get a student loan, but to be aware of it. I have two small boys. They can choose whatever path they want, obviously, but I would be thrilled ultimately, and they're 15 years out from undergrad still, they're really little guys. If they wanted to pursue an MBA, I would support them wholeheartedly. So to that end, I see the landscape is changing dramatically. It's much more consumer focused. You think about the Amazons of the world and how that's impacting all of retail and meeting people where they are. So whether that is a compilation of having educational opportunities that leverage what you've already done and take coursework off, and you'll see a lot more one-year MBAs or accelerated MBAs or ones that, really take into account your professional work experience that you've already done. So I would say it's going to become more of a mosaic, an a la carte instead of a buffet of like, you could take a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I think that's great. That's where higher education needs to go to be flexible and meet the needs of learners.
Thank you. Loris asked, GMAT or GRE? Most of you took the GMAT, I believe. Yes?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
So most of our panelists here took the GMAT. The GMAT versus GRE question comes up often. GMAT is still 9 out of 10 of the enrollees into business school programs use the GMAT. So it's still, I guess, we use the term gold standard as it relates to admissions. But the opportunity is there for GRE as well. When I am advising candidates on the road, you meet someone who they have a master's in journalism and they took the GRE and they have a strong score and it's still valid. I don't know that it makes sense for you to take another exam at that point. There's opportunity there for it.
Actually, I forgot. I actually took the GRE. I took the GRE because I had remember, like early in my career, I had started a master's at Columbia in education, and so I had the GRE. But then when I wanted to apply for business school, I actually then went back and took the GMAT. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what we'll see often. So it's like if you have it and it's valid and you have a strong score, I think it makes sense if you're at that point of decision and you know business school is for you specifically, it communicates, the path that you're on. So that's my 2 cents there.
I would throw on that too as well. I had taken my Gmat and I did a course and it made a huge difference and it seemed super expensive. And again, the trade-off for that was amazing. And you're able to see that, and a lot of them have money back guarantees. But when I applied to my program, they said, you are shy of a 50% diversity scholarship, 50% tuition. And I remember at the time being like, I don't want to take the Gmat again for a 3rd time. Like, that doesn't sound like fun to me. But as an MBA, like, making the base decision, paying $200 to retake the Gmat versus getting a $50,000 break on tuition would be the worst MBA ever if you didn't take that deal.
That's
so
right.
A lot of schools will look at test scores, particularly the Gmat, to determine how they're going to give merit-based aid. And I would say take that into consideration as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just right quick on the question of would you do it again? So I know there's different viewpoints there, but as others have mentioned, I would definitely do it again. I mean, so the value of MBA to me was something that made a lot of sense when I went over 10 years ago, and I think it makes a lot of sense now. And what I would possibly do a little bit differently is I may consider taking some other courses, like in how the cross section of business and technology, or business and psychology, or business and shareable economy. So as the world has evolved a bit more, I would probably think about spending more time in those cross sections where maybe courses either offered through the business schools or in like the other academic institutions that are there on campus, whether it's the law school, the School of Engineering, and other things, because I think now it provides a unique platform for you going forward. So that would just be my comment about what I would maybe do a little bit differently, but I definitely still would go back again. Not go back again. I went one time. I would do it again.
Yes, got it. Okay. This question is specifically for Malika. Coming from a non-business background academically, was there anything special you did to prepare for B school once you got in, or anything you did to get the most out of your experience?
Well, personally, because my undergrad was there was the elementary ed, but there was also the sociology, so there was stats heavy. So that actually was a benefit in B school. And then again, my personal story is Wall Street, so it was spreadsheet finance heavy. So actually, I found myself doing a lot of the kind of tutoring, if you will, with folks who did not have, bootstrapping in there under their, in their tool belt. But afterwards, so no, for myself, I didn't really have that issue, only because I kind of went from this non-traditional into just pure finance. But I can say that at Maryland, there were kind of like, and I think most of the schools have it as well. Workshops just before the semester starts. So you can actually take additional classes to kind of reacclimate yourself to being back in school. Or you could do it before, go take classes at maybe a local community college or something that would allow you to just wet your feet. so you're not, complete shock when you get there and have to balance everything.
I got a few questions here about scholarships, so I'll just kind of consolidate them. One was asking if anyone knows of scholarships for physically disabled, scholarships in general. What's the best avenues that candidates should take towards looking to pay for school?
When I went, I was a member of the Consortium for Graduate Study and Management. And the consortium gave scholarships, both partial and full, to member schools. I think there's like 30 some odd schools that are members of the consortium. So I would definitely look into that. Each of the schools had some sort of aid, right? The one of the challenges in education is there's kind of the MSRP, if you will, of school, kind of the number that they put out there. That's like the number on a card that you would buy, the price on a card that you would buy. And then it kind of comes down based off of different aid that they have. And you can figure that part out. But I can't speak any more highly about the consortium as a great place to start.
Yeah, I was sponsored, so I had, full tuition paid by my previous company or employer. So that may or may not be an option for some of you. Agree with the financial aid. Most schools have something, right? So whether they're a consortium school or beyond, at Duke, I had, in addition to that, but probably 75%, I think, of tuition is offered there. Then many schools may have other partnerships with other organizations who are providing funding, especially for a diverse population, whether it's women, vets, disabled individuals, ethnic minorities, et cetera, and possibly international students. So you really kind of check in with the schools, if you will, because it's going to vary greatly based upon what school you're talking about. And some schools may say, hey, if you're fortunate enough to get in, then you figure out how to pay for it, right? On the other end of the spectrum, and many will say they'll offer a lot of different options up front. Some of the employers, they will offer a pre-matriculation type option. So if you intern or get an early interview and receive an offer, you could possibly work there for the summer, going into the business school, and earn full tuition for the first semester of business school. And then, of course, there's always financial aid through either grants or through the government as an option. And then for some, you can do work study type options while you're in business school. So there's, I guess the important thing is determine is this for you or not, right? So obviously financial is going to be a key component, but if you can't get your head around, does it make sense to get an MBA or not, then figuring out how to fund it becomes kind of a secondary type topic. So if it makes sense, then there's clearly options to fund it. And you may come out of school with debt. I had classmates who had gone to law school and gotten, so they are already coming in with thousands of dollars of debt. So they had it was very important to them to figure out how to go about this. And some went down financial services at that point in time because they were paying well. So that the compensation was base salary, then the bonus structure could be 2 to 3 times your compensation for that given year. Now that's changed over time, but I guess again, it's just a point of you figuring out, how do you go about funding while you're in school, but also on the back end of going to business school. And then one last comment is that for some, you may pay $75,000, $100,000 to go to business school, and then you have to think about how passionate you are about what you do afterwards, and what does that look like financially. So different jobs and careers will pay at different levels. So it's not a good or bad thing. It's just knowing what that looks like based upon your career aspirations and also your financial situation.
Thanks, John. What I hate about this is that we have more questions than we have time to answer. And what I love about this is that we have more questions than we have time to answer. So I want to thank all of the panelists today. I see a lot of questions here about ROI. I'm sorry we can't get to them, but I hope that they all have inferred to you that the ROI is there. There is value in the MBA. And I hope you got something from this. One thing I do want to say, though, is that since we had so many questions, this is our inaugural event for MBAs of Impact. So moving into 2018, we're going to continue these conversations. We're going to turn them into smaller chats with one person where you can really get in depth with that person, learn more about who they are, what they've done, and how they've gotten to where they've gotten to. So please stay tuned for that. Again, sorry that we did not have enough time to get to all of your questions, but we really appreciate you being here with us. Panelists, thank you so much. The conversation was great. Our attendees loved it. They haven't told me, but they asked you a lot of questions, and I loved it. So thank you all so much, and best of luck to you. Happy holidays.
You too.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.